G'day guys, Solid here and welcome back to another episode of Bike Banter. This month we've got some really interesting topics, particularly what the hell is the difference between an adventure and a dual sport. We're going to dive into that. And also I wanted to announce that I'm now on Spotify in the podcast section. So if you want your favorite episode of Adventure News or Bike Banter and you want to sneak in an episode at work, you now can, or listen to it on your headset while you're commuting. So check that out as well. And without further ado, let's get into the video. The first viewer comment is from Daniel D, and he's saying he loves this new format of Bike Banter and it feels like he's sitting around the campfire with his mates after a ride. I'm glad you feel that way, Daniel, as that's exactly what I've tried to capture here. Just that kind of sense of we're all sitting around after a long ride, waxing lyrical, and the odd exaggerated story about our abilities at off-road riding. Even the birds are excited. So the first viewer question and the major topic of today is what's the difference between an adventure bike and a dual sport? This has been asked by multiple viewers, Lone Wolf and DKW, but I've also got it in the past. There's been quite a few videos made on this topic actually, but I never really feel like anyone's answered it adequately, at least not from my viewpoint. And that's exactly what I wanted to highlight with this question. Adventure is such an interchangeable and overused word that it really can be applied to any kind of riding. So it is a very subjective term, and as such, this is just going to be my opinion on the subject. So it might not align completely with your view. If you do have a really great perspective or opinion, please feel free to share it down below, as it would really add to the discussion. So I'm going to jump into what the hell is the difference between an adventure bike and a dual sport. So the first category you can see there is an enduro bike. Now I know that wasn't part of the question, but I think it's an important part of the overall picture to help us give an idea of the definitions between these segments. The enduro bike we term here in Australia is exactly what the manufacturer refers to as an enduro bike. So that's things like the KTM EXC series, the WRF series and Honda CRF 450L, as you can see in the picture. Now I know in America you sometimes refer to enduro bikes as plated dirt bikes or dual sports, but I'm talking about exactly what the manufacturer refers to as enduro bikes. What you can take off the showroom floor and then enroll in an enduro race, and it's going to be just perfect for the job. So think of bikes like the EXC, like I said, the WRF series and the Honda CRF 450L. So what exactly makes an enduro bike? Well, I think a focus on performance, high-end components, very good suspension, a single cylinder, and you usually got quite regular maintenance intervals. But these are the kinds of bikes you can purchase from the manufacturer on the Saturday, and then on Sunday enroll in an amateur or professional enduro race and do just fine. So that's exactly what an enduro bike is. It's a quite race-focused, performance-focused off-road motorcycle characterized by single cylinder, high power and great suspension. And you can see bikes like the EXC really characterize the segment. So does the WRF series. And kind of on the cusp of an enduro and a dual sport is the CRF 450L, where Honda have kind of tried to make a bike that's right on the edge to carve out a niche segment for themselves, where it does have a more wide ratio gearbox, a proper subframe whereas most enduros don't usually have a decent subframe. And the Honda's also made a little more comfortable on the road. So they've had to think about what's good about a dual sport and tried to make their enduro bike a little more comfortable. It is still an enduro bike, it's still performance focused, it has high maintenance requirements and it's performance orientated. So then we move into a dual sport. So what characterizes a dual sport over an enduro bike? Well, they have some similarities. That is, they both share a single cylinder, but that's where it ends really. A dual sport is much more focused on durability, longevity, and value for money. And that really sets it apart from the enduro bike, which tend to be very expensive and very performance orientated. So you're sacrificing that performance for some value for money and longevity, usually in the engine in particular. So you'll see bikes like the WR250R there. also the DR650, the DRZ400 and the KTM 690 Enduro, and also bikes like Honda's CRF 250L. These are all fantastic dual sports that are all still very capable off-road, but they also do a decent job on-road as well, depending on how you modify these bikes. Some of them are quite value orientated and you can really snap one up at a great price, and some of these bikes just go on and on forever. So they really do make a more budget orientated all-rounder option for those guys that do still like pushing it off-road. You know, you want to do the single track, but you also want to do the 1,000-kilometer road day with your mates on the bigger adventure bike. And with the right modifications, I think a dual sport can do just about anything you want it to, and that's why it appeals to me the most. So then we have the category of adventure bike. And the problem with adventure is it's a really overused term, and there's no defined segment for this adventure category. You know, we do have bikes that you can clearly identify as adventure motorcycles. Think of bikes like the GS series from BMW. In my opinion, that really started the whole adventure bike category. The big bikes like the 1250 GS or the F850 GS, those are adventure bikes in my opinion. You're looking at big bikes that are really suitable for on the road, long distance touring. They're often characterized by 2 cylinders or more, but not necessarily. They're really bikes that you can have adventures on. That is, go and explore, do big touring miles with a pillion on the back, with your luggage comfortably, and they're basically the SUVs of the motorcycle world. Now, I've got the KLR, as you can see there, on the edge of dual sport and an adventure bike. And that's because I think it's a really good descriptor of how it can be both. It is a single cylinder, but it is quite comfortable for the road because it has a bit of a fairing there. You've got a taller screen. It also has a fairly decent amount of room, so you can squeeze a pillion on the back. So you're starting to see some characteristics on that dual sport that make it great as an adventure bike. And then you move to bikes like the Tenere 700. So you're seeing the 2 cylinders there. You can easily take a pillion. You've got heaps of power, and you're looking at a lot of electronics on the bikes now. So things like traction control and ABS on bikes like the Africa Twin, and cruise control is now coming into the equation. And you're really looking at some very impressive features. The suspension's getting better again. And then you look at behemoths like the 1250 GS that has every kind of technology that you could imagine on it. The bike can pretty much ride itself. It still can do dirt roads, and with the right rider could probably even do some more technical stuff. They're very impressive bikes, but you got to think of them more as the SUV of the motorcycle world. They can do a little bit of everything. And the reason I think you can call any bike an adventure bike is because anyone can have an adventure on any bike. It's a subjective term, so that's why it gets so muddied. So to sum it all up again, the Enduro bike is a single cylinder, it's performance orientated, usually demands a high price tag, and you can buy it one day and race it in an Enduro race the next day. A dual sport is also single cylinder, but unlike the Enduro, it's focused on durability, longevity, and with the right modifications can do just about anything, hence the term dual sport or dual purpose. It can do just about anything you want it to. Then we have adventure bikes, often characterized by large amounts of power, more than 1 cylinder, but not always, and you're really looking at road comfort here. So things like traction control, ABS, cruise control, and all the creature comforts you could imagine. You can commute every day during the week through the traffic and be in comfort. And then on the weekend, you can put your partner on the back, load up your luggage and do 2,000 kilometers on the weekend and take that dirt road if you really wanted to. So I think that is what makes up a dual sport, an enduro and an adventure bike. The next question is from Hadrian Hain, and it's 2 parts. He's wanting to know, 1, why I didn't consider the 500 EXC, Well, mainly because of the maintenance intervals. I didn't need that much performance, and the KTM tends to demand a higher price than other dual sport offerings. So those are the major reasons I didn't consider it. Not because it can't make a good dual sport. I know with the right mods that these bikes really can be a great bike, but it was more performance, a higher price tag, and the kind of service intervals that I just wasn't looking for in my dual sport. So the second part of his question is, what's the possibility of a 390 Enduro? Well, I think it's a massive possibility. I've actually done an entire video just on this. I'll put a link up here. What happened in the beginning of the year was a photo was leaked from the KTM shareholders meeting, and in that photo we can clearly see that there is a 390 Adventure, although blurred out, so I shouldn't say clearly, and there's also a 410 from Husqvarna. Now, the big question isn't really whether this will be made. I really do think it will be, but what kind of motorcycle will we get? I think the largest possibility is we'll get a more watered down dual sport. And what I mean by that is it's made in India, like the Adventure, the RC, and the current Duke. So the suspension is fairly low end. I'm not bagging on these bikes as bad entry-level bikes. They're just not up to the same quality and off-road capability as the rest of KTM's offerings that are made elsewhere. So if it is made in India with the rest of the 390 series, I think it will be more soft-edged, not so dirt capable, and the components won't be so great, and they won't really focus on this being a durable off-road bike. The other way they could go, the less likely way, but the one I really hope they go for, is they really throw the kitchen sink at it, give it long travel, decent suspension. Think of a smaller version of the 690 Enduro R. If they did that, I think it would be a really fantastic bike, as I really do like the 690 Enduro, but it's just too heavy for my liking. So if they could get it in the 130 to 140 kilograms category, that would be fantastic. Although I'm pretty skeptical, as the Duke, from my memory, is somewhere around the 160 kilos, and I don't think you could lose much more weight on that bike. So my hopes aren't high, but yes, I do think they will be making a 390 Enduro. So stay tuned. I will let you know as soon as I find out more information on the bike. The next question is from Alpha Whiskey, and he's wanting to know why I didn't consider the 690 Enduro. I have spoken about this a little bit in the past, but I really didn't think this was suited to me as my next dual sport. It's too heavy for my liking. Coming in at about 158 kilos, it's just too much weight for me picking it up. Now, I have ridden with KTM's 690s before, and I've often helped my friends pick the things up, so I know how heavy they are, and it's really not what I'm after. Also, the performance as well. It's got a little too much power for my liking off-road. It's great on the road, but when it comes to off-road, it's got just a bit too much. And because I'm not that great off-road, just when you're whiskey throttling and needing it to be subtle, I think the 690 just isn't suitable for my needs. It's also stupidly expensive. I could get a couple of dual sports for the price of what a 690 costs. So in my eyes, those are the three main reasons: weight, price, and power. Just a little too much of all of those things. So Jim Perry's got the next question, and he's wanting to know what the Rubik's Cube has in relation to my channel and my symbol. It's basically a symbol of my personality. In real life, I'm quite reserved and quiet, and people often comment that I'm quite enigmatic and a bit of a mystery or a puzzle. And that's why I chose the Rubik's Cube as a symbol, as it is a puzzle. It's difficult to understand, and people don't quite get me to start off with, as I'm a bit weird. So I thought, what the hell, I'll choose the Rubik's Cube. It's colorful, it represents me, so that's why it's the basis of the Chronicles of Solid channel. So I also had quite a few comments getting annoyed at the fact that I was mispronouncing DRZ, and it should actually be DRZ if I call myself an Australian. So for all of you guys out there that commented on my particular pronunciation of DRZ, here you go. DRZ. So the next question is from Captain Darty, and he's wanting to know why I'm so biased towards tiny, cheap bikes. I guess I am biased towards tiny and cheap bikes. How did that get there?